All right, what's up, everybody? It's week 16 of the Occupy Fantasy Football Podcast. Brian Jester, co-founder of Occupy Fantasy, your co-host here, joined as always by our NFL Daily Plug writer, my co-host, Chris Rooney. Chris, man, we're getting down to the wire here, and things are falling apart quickly.
We have a lot of injuries to go through, Brian, but first and foremost, it appears that you were a good little boy this year because Santa Claus brought you a third place finish in the DraftKings Millionaire Maker this past Sunday. Congratulations to you. Let's hope that that is not the top this year for you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, a little disappointing not getting all the way to the top, but again, a little life perspective. It's hard to be mad at $50,000. So
Nope.
super excited about it, and hell, we got another week before the year is up, so we got plenty of time to win some more prizes. So we're gonna dive into this slate. It's a weird week. We're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. We get the Friday Christmas showdown slate, Saints and the Vikings. Then we have the next day a 3-day Saturday slate. Then, of course, we have our main slate on Sunday, and then we have the Monday showdown slate. So, as usual, this podcast is focused on the main slate for Sunday, week 16. But for the injuries and the running back section that we normally do, we will discuss some Friday and Saturday notes as well, because a lot of people will listen to this before those slates start, and there are some interesting news and notes to cover. So, Chris, like you said, lots of topics to dive into. And you and I were talking before the show. Week 16 has all of a sudden turned into like a week 17 type vibe with the matchups on the main slate and some of these injuries. So I gotta be honest. I'm not that excited about this main slate.
We don't have access to either, any of the Green Bay Packers, the Tennessee Titans, or the Buffalo Bills on Sunday because they're all primetime games. And then, on Christmas Day, we've got the Vikings playing the Saints. So, I mean, just those five teams right there. We've got like a lot of the running backs that we've been leaning on throughout the year, not accessible to us on Sunday. And I didn't even touch on the three games that we have on Saturday afternoon. So it's just a very thin player pool this Sunday for week 16, which is why it's going to be even more important for us to really pay attention to this news, to digest what player playing time and roles is going to look like on these teams. And I feel like we have a pretty good handle on it, honestly, here, but we'll definitely have a much better handle on it by the time the Daily Plug is up. Probably by, well, it's a weird week, obviously, with Christmas being Friday, Brian. So we're going to obviously try to get the plug up by Friday night. Might be a little earlier than that, just because on Christmas, I don't think any of us really want to be sitting down writing things. So I might actually have this up on Thursday night if people are being ambitious and want to look ahead of time.
Sick. That sounds good. Yeah, looking forward to it. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good because we have all these slates, and with everything going on, we can actually take some distractions off and celebrate the holidays and actually play some showdown slates and some 3-game slates. So looking forward to it. So let's look at Saturday. Let's start with our injury section. We'd like to look at what injuries happened in the previous week, what that means for this upcoming week, and basically all season the 49ers have been dealing with just a variety of injuries at all positions on both sides of the ball. No surprise that we have even more injuries to discuss for their game on Saturday. And to start, the quarterback, Nick Mullins, he busted up his elbow. C.J. Beathard's going to get the start. Raheem Mostert, who, stop us if you heard this before, was dealing with a high ankle sprain, re-aggravated it. He's now on injured reserve. And there are also some talks of George Kittle possibly coming back, which I don't think makes much sense from a team perspective, but these guys are competitors. You can't stop them from getting out there if they can. So a lot to digest for the San Francisco Niners on the Saturday slate.
Yeah, I don't anticipate Kittle being able to go. I feel like this is a perfect opportunity. And I guess the other thing to get into, other than injuries, that'll be even more impactful in week 17 is just overall team motivation. Like, what is San Francisco's motivation here, really, other than player evaluation? To me, Brian, I think they want to take an extended look at their first round rookie who's already been balling out and playing pretty well in Brandon Ayuk and see if he can really be, a guy they lean on in their passing game. Didn't touch on him here, but we don't expect Deebo Samuel to return either. So feels like this 49ers team will look a lot like the one we've seen the last few weeks, just with Beathard under center instead of Mullins, and with, honestly, Jeff Wilson probably will handle the majority of the touches in this backfield, which means he's probably going to be a running back we want to use pretty heavily on that Saturday 3-game slate.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because all these running backs have been in and out of the lineup all year for San Francisco. We only have one game to look at this year where Mostert was out and Jeff Wilson was in, and Wilson ran all over the Patriots for like 112 yards and 3 touchdowns. Tevin Coleman still being eased back from his injury, only 5 touches since he's returned. McKinnon, I guess, still has the tired legs. JaMychal Hasty's on IR, so if you're playing the Saturday slate, it definitely looks like a Jeff Wilson game. And then in the late game, we'll have to see Derek Carr, who just like destroyed his groin on that Thursday night slate and just sucked me out of 6K immediately. I guess he's fine and he's practicing. He's gonna try to give it a go on Saturday. I guess it was too rough to. I can't. Again, I'm not gonna talk about athletes' injuries and willingness to come back. I'm sure if he could have came back, he would have. It wasn't because of my showdown lineups he didn't come back in the game. But if he doesn't, we got mobile Marcus Mariota back there, who I gotta admit looked pretty good on Thursday.
Yeah, and I think we both kind of feel like Mariota may even just kind of be the better option there. Who are we? We're just a couple of fantasy players, right? But like Marcus Mariota just definitely looks like a more dynamic asset immediately sliding into, the lineup there. I know they didn't win the game, but he looked damn good on that Thursday slate, which I know you were paying close attention to. Tough beat. Obviously, sorry to kind of see how that shook out. I still think you had the right idea. Not that that's worth anything.
I'll tell that to the IRS. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. Put that on like a little note. Moving on to another team nobody really wants to think about anymore, the Jacksonville Jaguars. James Robinson, Brian, another one of these high ankle injuries. Look, even if he suits up, I think that right there is enough of a red flag to just not even play him in the slate against the Chicago Bears as a huge underdog. They looked terrible last week against the Ravens. We don't even know what their quarterback situation is going to be. This just does not, stepping away from the Robinson injury for a second, right? This just does not look like an offense that is like prepared to do anything. And that is kind of a disaster really for all types of like fantasy lineups, whether that's, season long or daily here. And to be honest with you, I think it actually should give us some concern even about the Chicago side of the ball in this upcoming game, because if, that's kind of how game flow works, right? If Jacksonville isn't doing anything, then Chicago's not going to really have much of a reason to do much on offense either. So this just looks like a really tough situation to me.
Yeah, just really not much interest in trying to win the game. Looking at them from an offense perspective, running on first and 10, running on second and long, throwing screens and other just like very conservative play calls on third down. So, yeah, if whether it's Gardner Minshew or Mike Glennon under center, James Robinson's not a great play. Add in the ankle injury, he's not great either. Even if he's out and we're like, oh no, we get a backup running back, we still don't know because we get two guys who are vying for work in a bad offense, not something we really want to target. Now, if you look on the flip side, the exact opposite end of the spectrum, we have a running back injury in the league's best offense in the Chiefs. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, a little hip ankle. I think issues probably putting it lightly considering how that looked. He's going to be out for the remainder of the regular season, and Le'Veon Bell's going to step in against the Falcons in the highest total game this week. What are your thoughts on Lev and his role in this offense, specifically for this game?
This is going to be interesting because they're telling us that CEH is definitely out for the rest of the regular season, could be back for the divisional round. I think they're anticipating having that bye week to get everybody rested up. I'll just make the call now on this podcast for everybody listening. I don't think Clyde Edwards-Helaire plays another football game, even in the postseason, even if they go all the way to the Super Bowl. It's just these, like you said, the injury looked a lot worse than they're saying it is. Which is obviously, I'm going to kind of trust how that looked when they carted him off the field. It looked really bad. They had him hobble off the field, but again, still looked really bad.
Didn't look good.
These ankle injuries, they destroy running backs for the rest of their seasons. Not going to make, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not Alvin Kamara, but we saw this last year with him. He tried to play through an ankle injury when he came back, just wasn't the same. Kansas City's motivation here to me, Brian, is to get an extended look at Bell in a couple of games that frankly don't really mean that much for them, to see if he can handle the workload. And, we actually have some kind of reports that I guess they're looking at Elijah McGuire, who was with them either last year or the year before that as a practice squad guy. They obviously already have Darrell Williams on the roster. Like, this is probably going to be an evaluation mode type of situation for the Chiefs to see who they want to have involved on their offense. And honestly, with this team, more importantly, who they want to have more involved in their passing game at the running back position, because this is clearly a team that's going to lean on Patrick Mahomes to try to win the Super Bowl again. I think Le'Veon Bell is their best option, but we'll know for sure by the end of the regular season, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, a lot of running back situations to discuss this week. If we go over to LA, and it it was Cam Akers' backfield, and then maybe we should rename this particular episode Week 16 the high ankle sprain, because Cam Akers also suffered a high ankle sprain. He actually returned to the game, but in true high ankle sprain fashion, the adrenaline wore off the next day. It swelled up, and he's already been ruled out for Week 16. So, Chris, I would imagine Darrell Henderson, who got a pretty hefty workload in the first half of the season when Cam Akers was, relegated to the number 3 running back, or he was out. I imagine he has a pretty good workload, but we've seen Sean McVay pull some tricks before.
Yeah, and the one thing that we can say with confidence about these two backs, Henderson and Brown, Brown has sort of mixed in as more of the passing down running back, all year. Now I know the roles have fluctuated, but that has clearly been a role that Brown has owned. So, depending on how this game goes, divisional matchup, second divisional matchup against Seattle, especially if they're trailing, this could be more of a Malcolm Brown game than a Darrell Henderson game. So, plus we also have Sean McVay up to his normal tricks saying that, oh, well, I have to look at the game plan and figure out exactly what's going to happen. Like, usually when he does that kind of stuff, it means that, we're about to get absolutely kind of railroaded here with kind of information. I don't think I was necessarily on it, but it was earlier in the season where Cam Akers got hurt the first time. I think he had that kind of the rib cartilage issue. And like all of like DFS land that we live in was like, it's Darrell Henderson week. And then it wasn't.
Yep.
We could definitely see that happen here again. They're both cheap this week on both FanDuel and DraftKings, but the uncertainty here is enough of a reason to give me pause and not just kind of look at this as an automatic, okay, there's my value back this week. I'd rather, we'll get into this, but I think I'd rather go with like a Le'Veon Bell or some of these other plays that we have left to discuss.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And it's hard to trust McVay when he's in his press conferences and the reporters are asking him. The more reliable source of the backfield has been the team reporters. They've had a pretty good pulse on who's going to get the carry. So we'll monitor the news and we'll read the reports here throughout the week. We won't listen to a single word McVay says, though, I'll tell you that, through Sunday. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh-Cincinnati game from Monday night a little bit. A crazy upset, but both sides suffered some injuries on their offenses. Eric Ebron had a hip injury. He left the game early. The report after the game was he didn't damage any internal organs, which, if that goes to show how serious the injury was, I think we can see from that report. And then Tyler Boyd is diagnosed with a concussion. He left the game, didn't return. He's in the concussion protocol. Short week for them since they played on Monday night. So both these guys are kind of iffy. I don't know, Chris. I don't know if we want to play their direct backups at all, or it has any impact on their offenses. But I can't imagine we see either one of these teams playing or either one of these players playing their respective games.
Even particularly on the Cincinnati side, where there's just nothing for them to play for here. Like, why would you take a guy like Tyler Boyd, who I think they see as a pretty integral part of their offense? Why would you even risk further injury to this guy in a game that means nothing? Sort of more to your advantage to kind of maintain or improve your draft position. I know players don't like to hear that, but like it just makes no sense for them to play Tyler Boyd this week. And then with Ebron, I mean, this is a Steelers team that is headed to the playoffs. They're gonna have a big game in 2 weeks as a result, and why rush him kind of back against? Well, if he can come back, it is a revenge game against his old team with the Colts, but I don't think we're expecting him this week either. So Vance McDonald, yeah, I don't have many thoughts on Vance here other than just big picture Steelers stuff. We know Ben Roethlisberger loves to come out and throw the ball 60 times for 240 yards. That's like what he's done all season long. Yep. And when he does that, the tight end usually gets like in that neighborhood of like 5 to 10 targets. So could be an opportunity here with Vance McDonald for us to exploit. Just kind of checking it out here as we talk through it. Matchup's terrible. Colts are one of the better defenses in the league against tight ends. So, I think I'm probably going to steer clear of this.
Let me check it out for you live. Nope. Doesn't look great.
Yeah, the answer is not good, Brian. Not doing that. So yeah.
All right. Final injury to discuss, and again, we don't know how serious this is. We'll have to monitor practice reports. Again, we are recording this on Wednesday. Can't emphasize that enough. But Michael Gallup left the game early with a hip pointer after scoring a touchdown. Noah Brown looked to be his direct replacement. We might be interested in this game. So, Chris, again, just something to monitor over the next couple of days.
Yeah, Gallup, even though the production hasn't necessarily followed, has been leading the Cowboys in routes run, targets, all that participation trophy data that we like to talk about here on this show. He's been the guy. So if he's unable to go, it really does open things up. I would say not just for Noah Brown, but really for everybody else that we like on the Cowboys. So stay tuned, so to speak. By Friday, we'll definitely know more there. If he's out, I mean, Gallup himself is cheap anyway, but if he's out, it just makes some of these more mid-range price guys like a CD Lamb or an Amari Cooper probably even that much more attractive here.
Yeah, that's probably the option to go. If he's out, then we just look more towards their established players who will be undervalued as a result, like you said, in Lamb and Cooper, as opposed to just playing his direct backup. All right, let's move on to some more running back situations. Not really injury focused, but we'd like to look at how backfields have moved around the last couple of weeks to get a sense of where the usage will lie here in Week 16. Let's look at the Saturday slate really quickly since Tampa Bay is on that slate. Ronald Jones has not been activated from the COVID list, from my understanding, so it sounds like he's probably unlikely to play on Saturday, which means we get Leonard Fournette and Lesean McCoy mixed in. What was your take on Fournette last week? And because we both had concerns about his passing game role, McCoy did get some targets, but what were your thoughts on how that actually shook out in that game?
We thought it would. I know the box score results ended up looking fine because he scored 2 touchdowns, but he didn't exactly light up the television screen, if that makes sense. There were no huge highlight plays from Leonard Fournette. He's a between the tackles plotter, and they gave him the ball and he went out there and he got them, 2 to 3 yards per touch. And there just happened to be a couple of touchdowns with that. So I don't think we're going to be excited to play Leonard Fournette on this Saturday 3-game slate, but we're looking at a situation where he gets 75% of the running back touches for Tampa Bay if Rojo's out again. Playing the Detroit Lions, we're probably going to want to use this guy on that 3-game slate, especially with Tampa Bay being 10-point favorites, I think. I know we don't necessarily talk about that normally on this show, but I'm pretty sure that's what the line is right now. So, we're probably going to be looking to use Lenny if this holds serve through Week 16.
Jeff Wilson, Leonard Fournette. How could you not play DFS on a Saturday in December? Let's talk about Dallas. I mean, we actually briefly hinted or talked about this on last night's Tuesday night $1 Million Mission on Twitch, talking about the late news with Tony Pollard. Maybe we want to get into that here for a sec, Chris. I would like to know how you handled it and what your process is, because we thought Zeke would play. He didn't practice all week, but all the words around camp was that he was going to play and just use the week to rest. Then at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, Zeke gets ruled out. We get Tony Pollard, who we've been waiting to play all year in a workhorse role, actually gets the lead role. He goes out and crushes, gets 18 to 22 touches, gets 9 targets, looked dominant. Of course, right before we started recording, Zeke came back to practice. He probably saw how Tony Pollard looked and was like, well, let me get my ass back in the game. And it looks like he'll play this week, so this may be a moot point, but I want to know how you handle it. When 11:30, you get off the Periscope, you read that Zeke's out. What was your process?
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to add on to this a little bit, and season-long players, I think it's running back relevant. There were really 2 news items that broke about 90 minutes before lock on Sunday. The Tony Pollard one is the most prominent, especially because of what he ended up doing in the game. The other one that broke, though, we thought was going to happen. We just didn't get confirmation. All of those players from Miami were out, right? So for me, and I don't think we've talked about this in a while on this show specifically, but I am mostly a cash game player on these classic slates. I do kind of like that game. And this week I really wanted to figure out a way to get, even though it's not required in cash, I really wanted to get that Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews stack. We were pretty optimistic about it for all contest types. We had been talking about it all week. I know that that definitely was one of the stacks I think you probably used in a lot of your kind of major action in tournaments in the week, as did I. So being able to get Tony Pollard at 5,200 at running back was something that just made it really, really easy to get there. Also with Lynn Bowden Jr. at 3,600 at receivers. So the other thing that I did was pretty heavily optimistic, if you will, about the situations for Brandon Ayuk and Marvin Jones Jr., 2 receivers that we had written up in the daily plug going into the week. So getting both Pollard and Bowden available as plays, I mean, it just opened the floodgates, right? It allowed me to get the Lamar Andrews stack. It allowed me to get Alvin Kamara, who was our cover boy. So no, he didn't necessarily have the best day, but he did fine, especially for cash. So the lesson, that we kind of continue to learn, and, those of us who've been playing this game for a while know this already, but it doesn't necessarily mean our listeners and our subscribers and our viewers know this or have played as long as we have. When you get kind of a last second opportunity for a player to get, a potential 3 down roll like Tony Pollard, where he's going to get, potentially 20 carries, potentially, we're thinking at the time 3 to 5 targets. You got to play that guy, especially if they're priced below like 5,500 on DraftKings and 4,700 on FanDuel was his price. Like Tony Pollard was a free square, and I think, since most of my action was cash, I think obviously across FanDuel DraftKings, I probably had like 80% exposure to Pollard, so that was good. But I wish I was able to get more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact that it happened so late meant that the average player and even most, I think, professional players couldn't react as fast as they would like. Because, Chris, let's just say Zeke was ruled out on Wednesday. What do you think? Like, what ownership do you think Pollard would have had? I imagine it eclipses 50% on FanDuel at his price. Maybe doesn't get that high on DraftKings because he was 5,200 and Fournette was cheaper, but certainly it would have been exponentially higher. So that created a pretty big edge for us, and it's just another reason why we have to pay attention on Sunday mornings.
Well, when we consider the context of where some of the quote unquote best plays are right now on the board in DFS, I guess like the Chiefs, in addition to guys like Lamar Jackson, who we liked last week, we need these plays, right? Like these are the plays that allow us to get those guys in our lineups. So yeah, if we had 3-4 days to kind of digest that and really kind of figure out what Tony Pollard's situation was going to be, there's no doubt in my mind he would have been, like 70 to 80%, if not more, in cash games, like those large field double ups that we see across both sites, and probably like at least 50% in large field tournaments as well. Like that's how strong of a play he was in that spot. And I know that it's behind us now, but the overall lesson is when you see a situation like that in the future, pounce on it, because that's kind of what we've learned. We've kind of learned from not doing that in the past. And so when it crops up now, I know like you and I, we talk about almost every slate at this point. And when we get these situations, I don't care who, I mean, it's been Brian Hill in the past. It's burned us twice now, I think. But we always look at kind of these situations, and it's not just about Tony Pollard, right? It's about what does it allow us to do with the rest of our lineups. And that's kind of the key lesson, I would say.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't have said it better myself. So 2 more running back situations to talk about really quickly before we move on to the Week 16 betting market. Miami, I guess Miles Gaskins is returning from the COVID list this week. He did practice today, but Savon Ahmed was the lead back last week, got 24 touches. I saw the stat line. I was like, wow, he got 24 touches, but I didn't realize that the Miami running backs themselves got 40 touches in a game they completely dominated against New England. And then Atlanta, Todd Gurley, I guess just in name, has been benched because he hasn't really been doing much anyways. He had 3 carries last week. Both he and Brian Hill rushed for negative yards against Tampa Bay. Ito Smith's going to be the lead back for the final 2 weeks of the season. Any takes on these 2 backfields?
Anyone that kind of is disgusting like us and tracks this kind of usage data, we already knew Ito Smith was the guy that was at the top of the depth chart for Falcons at running back. Haven't necessarily had any interest in playing Falcons running backs for the last several weeks. I guess if you're looking for a kind of DFS actionable specific take here, which is why everybody listens to the show, the Chiefs, one of their weaknesses is defending the run. So if you're looking to do something weird in tournaments, I think Ito Smith might actually be on the board here. That's the Saturday slate with the Dolphins again. They have a game against the Raiders. Gaskins going to be important there. If he's not active, I think we want to use Ahmed. So there you go.
Keep it simple. I like it. So moving on to Week 16, this is going to be purely main slate focus from here on out. Biggest main slate spreads. I mean, I think if we just look at the spreads and totals this week, it has a very Week 16, Week 17 vibe where tons of big favorites and not that many high totals. So let's start with the spreads. Chiefs 10.5-point favorites against the Falcons. Browns 9.5-point favorites against the Jets. Baltimore 9.5-point favorites against the Giants. Houston 8.5-point favorites for once against the Bengals, of course. And then the Bears 7.5-point favorites against the Jaguars. All these teams are basically in the bottom half fighting for top 5 draft slots. So no surprise that they're big underdogs. Takeaways when you see this many big favorites.
I think, and this isn't necessarily my area of expertise or forte, so obviously hold me accountable, keep me honest here, but this pretty much tells us exactly where the ownership is going to go on this slate, right? I mean, with all of these kind of lopsided spreads in these games, it feels like we're going to see a lot of Kansas City. We're going to see a lot of Cleveland. We're going to see a lot of Baltimore, Houston, Chicago. These are the teams people are going to play players from. I think it's pretty much how I'm reading it, right? Yep. So specific to running back, which is what we like to talk about in this section, I think it's a little messier though. I don't know if people are going to be sold on Le'Veon Bell, especially when they kind of think about how the Chiefs just kind of prefer to pass the ball anyway. So it's easy to poke holes in a lot of these guys. You have Nick Chubb, huge favorite against the Jets. But honestly, if we want to be pragmatic and honest, about this, the Jets are actually not that bad of a run defense. Now, Quinnen Williams is out for the season, so that may change things there. But does Chubb actually get full workload? Does Kareem Hunt mix in? There's kind of reasons to be afraid to play a guy like Chubb, who in this group I believe is one of the more expensive price players. We've got J.K. Dobbins with the Ravens, who's a big favorite against the Giants, but he loses opportunity to his quarterback, Lamar Jackson, because he also can run the ball a little bit as well. David Johnson, who has randomly been Christian McCaffrey for the second half of this kind of season here. I mean, he might be the chalkiest of the group here.
That's
And then,
terrible to feel. That's oh my god, that makes me feel terrible to hear that.
that was like, brand new sentence potentially. I guess didn't write him. Oh yeah, no, I did write him down, but like my brain, Brian, like went right past his name because like David Johnson, like, can we do this here? 8.5 point favorite against the Bengals. I will say one thing about David Johnson before I let you answer me. We all react to news and transactions in this league because we are like disgustingly obsessed with NFL football because we play DFS. And this past offseason, we see that the Houston Texans make a trade for David Johnson. And I believe if I recall how this news broke, like for all of us, that was the initial news. It was like, okay, Houston has traded for David Johnson from, Arizona. And we're all thinking, oh, that may not be that bad. Like they actually have had a revolving door at running back. I think that they were using, God, reaching back. I think it was Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson last year they were using. That wasn't really going very well. And I think the story then became, oh my goodness, Bill O'Brien traded freaking DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson. And so let's just think about being like David Johnson, the person here for a second. He's had months of just listening to people talk about how this was like the worst transaction ever. And by the way, we're probably right to say that from like an executive management, process. But this is still someone who I think is a good football player and probably has a lot of pride in his abilities and probably wants to go out there and prove that he belongs on the field. And now he's playing the Cincinnati Bengals. This actually could be a really good David Johnson game. Yes, he's disgusting to kind of talk yourself into. If you can't tell already by listening to this, I've already gone through this process and talked myself into him a little bit. But I do seriously think this could be a very, very good David Johnson week. And part of the thing that was a surprise against the Colts last week with David Johnson, Brian, was the targets. He had 11 targets, 100 yards receiving. Why is that? I mean, this is an offense that has one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, but they literally have like a trio of practice squad guys that they're running out at receiver, along with Brandon Cooks, who has half of a functioning brain right now. So, like, David Johnson may actually be their best player on offense for him to work with.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the targets were the most surprising thing last week. You see the fantasy totals, like, wow, David Johnson had a good game. And then you look and see he had like 100 yards receiving. It's like, holy shit, this is crazy. And I think the big thing was Duke Johnson was out. CJ Procise was out. Let's monitor that too. If those guys are back, maybe he gets less work. But again, it is a good matchup. And the fact that we've talked about David Johnson this long goes to show how gross this entire slate is because there aren't that many running backs to choose from, not that many game stacks to choose from. Any other running backs really quickly that you're looking at for the main slate before we get into the game totals?
Chris Carson with the Seahawks actually played 74% of the snaps, had 15 carries, 3 targets last week for Seattle against Washington. They did have Rashad Penny come back, but looks like he got hurt again, so he's not a factor. DJ Dallas has not really been super involved as kind of one of their rookies this year, and Carlos Hyde's role has actually been scaled back. Looks like the concerns, I believe it was a foot injury with Carson. Looks like those have really kind of come down to earth a little bit. Looks like he's good to go. So he may be someone else we look at. We did talk about this player a lot as well. If for some reason we find out Ezekiel Elliott is out again, obviously we're going to be all over Tony Pollard again as well.
Yeah, I can't wait to play Tony Pollard on the slate, considering the other options if it is a thing. So, all right, hinted at it before. The highest totals for this week: Atlanta and Kansas City, 54-point total. After that, it's a 5-point drop. Philadelphia and Dallas, 49.5. Denver and the Chargers, 48.5. The Rams and Seattle, 47.5. As we know, Chris, we like to talk about avoiding divisional rematches in the second half of the year. But you and I did talk, and this Philadelphia Dallas game at 49.5, although it is a divisional rematch, it's two completely different quarterbacks. Yeah, Ben DiNucci the first time these guys played for Dallas, and they ran this like weird circus offense with him. And then the first time they played, Carson Wentz was under center for the Eagles. Now much different offense with Jalen Hurts back there. So I don't know if we can really count this as a divisional rematch, which means that maybe it's a game we can target.
I think part of the trend line there, right, with these rematches is defenses know how to attack the opposing quarterback. That's not in play here. So, and we like to, at least I like to say, you can't have hard and fast rules in DFS. Yes, we know that second divisional games generally are bad. It's always nice to have one of these exceptions crop up so we can try and prove to people that there are situations where we can kind of fade our own advice, right? I want to hold you accountable here, and I am calling you out a little bit.
Oh man, okay.
You decided that it was a good idea to tell us, meaning the Occupy staff in our staff chat this Wednesday afternoon, since we like to tell people when we record, that fading this Chiefs game might be the move this weekend. Brian, convince the people you're not entirely crazy here.
Man, again, this is a Wednesday take. I don't know if it's ready for public, but I'll say it. You know what? So we got all right. So we're already in week 16. We have a total that's 5 points higher than everyone else. Look on Twitter. You see people trying to fit in lineups from this game already. It's only Tuesday and Wednesday we're talking here. And as a result, we're going to see probably condensed ownership on this game. A lot of game stacks, although game stacks aren't that popular. We'll see, 2x1s, 1x1s, whatever in this game, much more than any other game on the slate by a wide margin. But you got to figure Kansas City basically has the 1 seed locked up. I know they said they're not going to rest players, but that could impact their play calling a bit. If you look at EPA per play, expected points averaged, Mahomes hasn't been playing that great in the last few weeks. And I think you can kind of see that if you've been watching the games as well. Also, Kansas City's freaking really expensive with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce being the highest priced tight end in like 5 years. Mahomes really pricey himself. Calvin Ridley on the other side, super pricey. They might get Julio Jones back. Who knows? Atlanta also has a penchant for playing really poor games on the road. So we got that here. So I think a lot of a perfect storm of events here that even if they don't perform, even if they perform at expectations, if they don't go beyond expectations, I think it's a really big opportunity. But Chris, the question is like, what do we replace with that? What is the opportunity here? Because what are some game stacks that we can look at that could get leverage? Because on first glance, nothing looks that great.
I want to stay with, and first of all, I think there's a lot of merit to what you're saying here. Like I kind of kid and say I'm holding you accountable. There may be a path here. I mean, it's you literally cannot run. Well, you can, you shouldn't. You can't run a Mahomes, Hill, Kelce, Calvin Ridley lineup. Like it's just impossible to build a good lineup that has all 4 of those guys in it. That means our cheap stack piece kind of theory that you stumbled on is valid here. We've got a guy like Mecole Hardman, very cheap on the Kansas City side. Seems to have a pretty established role. Should see, at least kind of 3 to 5 targets at just 3,100 on the DraftKings side of things here. So that's one way to get there with this game. The 3 games early here in the week that I like, I say like in quotes because I don't like them, but they're just kind of at the top of the list. Seattle and the Rams. Again, it is a second divisional game, but we're sort of at the point in the season where it's tough to avoid those. We have Philadelphia and Dallas. I skipped one on our show notes here. I'll come back to it in a minute.
Okay.
And we already kind of touched on why we like Philadelphia and Dallas. Jalen Hurts just suddenly looks like the best freaking quarterback in the league. Andy Dalton, competent NFL quarterback. Defenses on both sides have not necessarily seen either of these guys. If I can get some kind of confirmation from the team that we're going to stick with Gardner Minshew in Jacksonville, that James Robinson's going to be active, I guess we can look at Chicago and Jacksonville. If you can't tell by my tone, if you're listening to this is probably going to be a game I pretty quickly move on from. I mean, it just kind of popped to me as a game where if you look at the accessible ceilings for the top players on both offenses, it looks attractive on paper, right? I mean, you can see a path where Trubisky and Allen Robinson and David Montgomery and like DJ Chark, let's say, gets there. But there's just kind of more going on behind the scenes on the Jacksonville side of things that probably will push me off this game. Brian, looking at kind of the spreads and totals moving around, if you want to find a place to go that isn't Kansas City and Atlanta, do I have an even worse spot for you? It does look like in early action here that the Cleveland Browns and the New York Jets game Total is up 3 points at Pinnacle. Opened at 44. It's at 47. Maybe that's a little bit of an overreaction to the Jets suddenly looking like a football team against the Rams. But those are the things we like to look at. Another situation where the total is up slightly is, of course, I had it and I looked away, and that is always a great thing to do when you're live on the air. It is that Philadelphia-Dallas game. It's up a point. So
that's good to see.
Yeah. Those are probably. Do we? I mean,
let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. I think we're on the same page. We're about to hit on the same point here, right? We're not really thrilled by many of the game stacks, and we have a lot of high team totals, but not a lot of high game totals. Like we have 5 or 6 teams above 26, 27 points. What if we ran just the one side of those games and not running back on the other side? Let's just say Cleveland Jets. We run all 3x1 Cleveland stacks and running back with a Jet, which I know we've been terrible at predicting this year. Baltimore, we'll get here in a second, some Giants receivers that we like. Houston, on their side, got some receivers. Chicago. Like, maybe we just run one side of games and don't really stack any one game in particular this week. I think that might be the way to go.
I think so, especially when we can use some of these quarterbacks that we know kind of still have motivation to go out and play well. And those are guys like Lamar Jackson. Those are guys like Jalen Hurts, let's say, right? Where they're still in the playoff race. They need to win these games to stay in the race. So that may be the way we go here. As always, make sure you check out the daily plug that is on occupyfantasy.com. It'll be up on Christmas Day, and that'll give you some, we're going to put that present under the tree for you where you can kind of open up your phone, your computer, whatever, go to occupyfantasy.com and see what we kind of have for you as the path to success this weekend. That's my gift to you this holiday season.
So generous, Chris. Thank you, sir. So, all right, let's round out the show with the top receivers and tight ends to target this week. Game stack's not looking great, but at least we can drill down to the individual player level and find some guys to target. Underperforming receivers this week, quite a list, I'll say. Interesting list. So I'm going to name them off, Chris. You tell me what sticks out to you. If you're playing the Saturday slate, Nelson Aguilar, he is a top 3 underperforming receiver on the list, so be sure to target him if you're playing the Saturday slate. DJ Chark leads the way, and if you watch that game, it should be no surprise. He was wide open on a touchdown, and Gardner Minshew literally threw it into the stratosphere, and the cornerback had plenty of time to recover. So that happened a lot on Sunday. DJ Chark still underperforming this year. Chase Claypool in his little bit of a reduced role now for Pittsburgh. Terry McLaurin. And then we have 3, yes, count them, 3 Giants players on the underperforming receivers list this week. Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, and Evan Ingram is one of 2 tight ends. Zach Ertz joins him as well. So, Chris, the rare 2 tight end underperforming list this week, the rare 3 from the same team list. So lots to digest.
First place I want to start here is you really hate to see this from Chase Claypool. Not only is he underperforming, man posts on his Twitter account on November 1st that, losing, never heard of her. And now the Steelers have lost like 3 out of the last 4 games or something like that. Like, he was asking for it. Aguilar on Saturday. I want to start there just so we can get it out of the way. Aguilar on, that's the take. Aguilar on Saturday. Play Nelson Aguilar, on that 3-game slate. We have an underperforming receiver on a really kind of condensed environment of games to choose from. He's probably going to be one of the receivers we like the most. I mean, am I that far off the mark here? I kind of feel like you'd play a lot of Nelson Aguilar on this slate if you were playing it heavily, right?
I play him heavily anyway, so yeah, I'm definitely going to play him heavily on this slate.
Yeah, exactly. I like going with the Ravens on. We were just talking about this with stacking options. There are a lot of things that we can do with Lamar Jackson. Obviously, we have Mark Andrews. Hollywood Brown looked like he went right back to his role at the top of the depth chart in that game against the Jaguars. Now we have the ability to kind of stack those 3 guys, maybe even mix in some of the other receivers on Baltimore or a J.K. Dobbins, and just rotate, right? Throw in like a Darius Slayton or a Sterling Shepard or an Evan Ingram. That'll probably help you build a lot of unique stacks this week. Not sure a lot of people are going to be stacking that game. So that's probably the situation that's like most attractive to me here. Do like Jalen Hurts. Just how can you not after what he's done the last couple of weeks? But now we actually have a bit of a lean on who to pair with him with Zach Ertz here, who, the actual fantasy point production in that game last week wasn't phenomenal, but he was. I know you were paying attention because you had Hurts in your big lineup there.
Just a little bit.
My take watching that game was just kind of like, wow, Ertz is like out there way more than I thought. Like he was going to be coming off this injury. So, and obviously the data like shows that because we liked Goddard last week, and that was why we were paying attention to Ertz. We're like, why is this guy out here?
Yes.
So I think we can use Ertz this week. He's pretty cheap. I think he's just $3,100 3,100. I know I wrote this down. Yeah, 3,100 on DraftKings this week. So,
Perfect.
and that's kind of, exactly a cheap piece that we can stick in there. And we, without potentially Michael Gallup, we've got kind of those receivers on Dallas that we can bring back in stacks there as well. Don't want to just kind of give complete short shrift to Scary Terry, the F1 there with the Washington football team, but that everything feels like it's falling apart for them, right? A lot of uncertainty at quarterback. You've got Dwayne Haskins doesn't seem very invested in the process right now. Alex Smith is, yeah, Alex Smith, he just hasn't really looked like the same player that was a Pro Bowler a few years ago. So we do have another kind of factor there as well. As good as Scary Terry is, Brian, his teammate, our favorite player in the NFL. We've talked about him every freaking week on this show. Logan Thomas, 17 targets in week 15 against the Seahawks. I mean, is Logan Thomas the top receiver now for Washington? Like, that is a real concern to me if you want to kind of go all in on Terry McLaurin, right? It could just as easily be a Logan Thomas game at this point.
He won somebody $1 million. We were on. You were on Logan Thomas from week 1. I thought he was going to win one of us $1 million. It just so happens the flop lag was 15 weeks later in week 14 or whatever it was. So week 15, yeah. But I mean, let's move to the tight ends now as we round out the show. But Logan Thomas still, as always, running tons of routes, just no longer a wind sprint specialist anymore, actually getting the volume to go with it. So, I mean, there's a couple of guys this week. Evan Ingram, who's on the underperforming receivers list, he's still running a ton of routes, seeing targets. I mean, there's a lot of guys here to target this week at the position.
Of Logan Thomas, we're talking a lot about DFS lessons because we're kind of winding down the show for the season, right? We only have this slate and the week 17 one left. Players like Logan Thomas are going to come and go. I just kind of want to step back and talk about this for a second here. Logan Thomas and what he did last few weeks, frankly, is the reason we look at this participation data. It's the reason we look at snap counts. It's the reason we look at routes run data, because I know it sounds really simple, but the first step to getting the opportunity to get us the fantasy points we need to hit the top of the leaderboards is being on the fucking football field, right? Yes. And so this will happen for the rest of our lives that we play this damn game. There will be a player that we just kind of see the data that says, wow, this guy is just playing a ton. He's just not doing anything. Follow those guys, because the matchups will come up where it will make sense for you to go in on them. And look what happened. As you said, Logan Thomas has made somebody a millionaire. Happy for them. Wish it was one of us.
What a world.
Again, that is why we pay attention to these guys. And there are a couple others this week that I don't think people are necessarily going to be like jumping out of their chairs to fit into their lineups this week, but I do think are worth paying attention to. Austin Hooper returned for the Cleveland Browns on that showdown single game slate on Sunday night, caught a touchdown pass, believe it was the optimal captain on DraftKings, facing a Jets team whose weakness is defending the pass, not defending the run. Baker Mayfield does like to throw to his tight ends, particularly in the red zone. Probably going to want to look to a guy like Austin Hooper, who is just 3,500 on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel this week. We've also talked about another tight end that's pretty affordable a couple of times now. His resume actually is starting to look very Logan Thomas-esque from the beginning of the year. It's Cole Kmet with the Chicago Bears. Still running a route on over 90% of Mitch Trubisky's dropbacks. Hasn't necessarily seen the target volume the last couple weeks. He is playing more than Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham is getting more targets still. So that's sort of the difficult situation there with the Chicago Bears. Both of these tight ends are on the field. To me, Brian, that suggests Kmet is still a pretty good tournament play here, though.
Yeah, and again, all these guys, cheap stack pieces if we decide to stack. If we go with the route of stacking big favorites this week as opposed to stacking entire games. So hopefully we didn't turn you off from DFS this week enough with all of our talk about how gross this slate was for Sunday. But if you're still with us this long, that means you're invested. You're going to play on Sunday. So if that's the case, be sure to check out Chris's daily plug at OccupyFantasy.com. We posted at some point by the end of this week for Sunday's main slate. We'll have the Occupy model up and running. We'll have the daily plug. Actually going to do a special edition for Christmas, so we'll have that out Thursday for the Saints and Vikings game. Be sure to check that out. And, of course, the model will rank all the players for every slate, no matter which slate you're playing. NBA just started. The first NBA Daily Plug was today, Wednesday, the 23rd of December. Occupy model is up and running with projected ownership. If you're an NBA fan, if you like pain and you want to play NBA DFS, we already have the first strip club, if then, of the Daily Plug. it's a crazy season already, and the first games have just started. So if you like NBA, be sure to check that out too at AccuBetFantasy.com.
We
So
have phenomenal transitions between the NFL and the NBA, Brian. Sorry for interrupting you, but like the strip club stories between both leagues, overlapping in the same week. What a world, right? It's perfect.
no, I mean, again, I understand strip clubs, and I understand the allure, but seeing the worlds collide is truly special with the NFL and Dwayne Haskins and the NBA and James Harden. So I think it's a perfect note to end our Week 16 show. Be sure to join us next week for the final edition of the 2020 season, the Week 17 show. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube if you're watching the video or in your favorite podcast app. We always appreciate that. So I speak for Chris. Happy holidays to everyone out there. Good luck this week, and we'll talk to you soon.